Alright, so good afternoon. Today we're going to talk about Hoare's partition algorithm, or basically more commonly known as the Quicksort algorithm. Basically going through, you're going to try to figure out, well, it's basically working with the pivot. You're working with the I position as well as the J position, which is position this one in AL, which is basically going to be your leftmost position on the entire array, and then J is going to be your rightmost position on the entire array. These are my 8 cards. And basically, moving throughout the array, you want to make sure that AI, which is this one, and you can really set your pivot to be any of these 8 numbers, but I'm just going to choose 7 just for the fun of it, honestly, and make sure that I'm lucky. Lucky number 7, basically, so if this one is greater than the pivot, and if J were to be greater than the pivot, then you would switch both of these numbers at the same time. But since only I is the one that is greater than the pivot when it should be less than the pivot, then you're going to keep I in the same position. But J is going to move down 1 position. But now, since J is less than the actual pivot, which is right here, and then I is more than the pivot, then you will switch these two. So now you have 10 in the J position, and you have 3 in the I position. But also what you want to do is also the 7 could still stay as a pivot. And now, since those two just switched, you want to move this down, and you want to move this down. Okay, so now this one is good. 8 is good since it's already greater than your actual pivot, which is 7. And 2 is good as well since it's already less than your actual pivot being 7. So now you could put 7 in the I position, which is also still the same as the pivot. And then you would move this down to 4. So now the 7 is already basically a given. So it's literally going to stay in the same position. But you will change it with the I, actually, simply because the 7 and the 4 are less than one another. And then the pivot now becomes to the J position. And then these two would move down. And now, as you can see right now, both the I and the J position are right next to one another. So basically they will cross over just to test to see if there is any number that would be in between the two of them. But right now there isn't one. They're already in chronological order. So then basically we'll just continue on from there. And now with these being I and J, you want to continue and basically work on these 4. And you will use the same method as well. I is already equal to the pivot. J is going to be greater than the pivot, so now you would just move I down. So now I is less than the pivot, so you want to make sure that these two, so now you want to change the position of I and J, and then move the pivot along as well. And basically, without even testing without even testing I at 4 and 5, you can already see that these two are already in line. So basically, you want to move the pivot down here as well. And then these are more I and J's as well. So now, with this set, you just want to place the I. You want to test the I and see that the J is greater than the I. So now you just want to keep moving this down. And then keep moving this down as well. So now these are all in the right place. So now when that happens, you just want to move the pivot down to the next one. And then basically you want to test for I being the exact same thing. Being now in the pivot position as well. So now 7 is on the right side of 9. 9 is on the right side of 8. And now this is supposed to move down, and 8 is less than 10. So now these are all set up just going to that point. So now the pivot is 10. And now when you put, well, you could just move I down the line even though it's already in order up to this point. And then basically you want to put the I on 10, and then basically 10 is greater than 9, so of course you want to move it. And then now, after this, you see it's an entire row set up strictly through Quicksort. So I hope this helped you guys figure out the algorithm, and good luck.